we go through this life and we have a lot of problems and a lot of troubles and a lot of challenges, and we develop certain beliefs that limit us and make us judge ourselves. And yet, as we read the spiritual teachings, it's all about love. Love yourself, love your neighbors, love God, love everyone. That's a challenge for us on this planet because we've been programmed in our childhood to criticize ourselves, to criticize other people, and to be very judgmental about what isn't, quote, right. Well, what isn't right is judgment. That's what's not right. So what does real love really feel like? I have a quote from Ernest Holmes who responds to this question of, what would you do differently if you could rewrite the Science of Mind book? And his answer was, I would write a lot more about love. And yet, his book is loaded with statements about love. And this is another quote from the Science of Mind, page 26, by Ernest Holmes. Our inherent nature is forever seeking to express itself in terms of freedom. We do well to listen to this inner voice, for it tells us of a life wonderful in its scope, of a love beyond our fondest dreams, of a freedom which the soul craves. One phrase in there just resonates totally with me. A love beyond our fondest dreams. Can you even begin to imagine what a love beyond your fondest dream would look like? You know, we hear the word unconditional love and we hear the word agape. And what do these words mean? Oh, unconditional love doesn't mean that if you're in a relationship, you let someone walk all over your face or put you down or condemn you or belittle you. That isn't what a love relationship is about. And yet we're all going through a learning stage to move to the stage of remembering who we are, and who we are as unconditionally loving beings. I couldn't have done this talk 40 years ago because I hadn't, like many men at my age, my feelings were stuffed. You know, little boys don't cry and all the other nonsense that went with it. And then at about the age of about 42, I had to start opening up. And then when I was 28, I wondered, what's the matter with me? I don't know. I don't really feel like I love anybody. I don't know what love is like. What is love like? What's wrong with me? Any of you had that? Yeah. Yes. So I have a question I want to ask you. If you wouldn't mind, raise your hands. If it's too personal, you don't want to, it's okay. How many of you felt unconditionally loved by both parents? Wow, that's sad. 4, 5. 5 out of a room over 30. Wow. How many of you have been loved unconditionally by a friend? Oh, a lot more hands. Where's our family? Sometimes in our friends. How many of you have been unconditionally loved by a romantic lover? Oh, that's pretty good. That's pretty good. How many of you have felt unconditionally loved by any higher being? Oh, that's wonderful. That's wonderful. How many of you have felt unconditionally loved by the Creator, Father, Mother, God? Yeah, that's beautiful. So how many of you have felt unconditionally loved by anyone? Yeah. You know, that show of hands would have been very different 40 years ago. I did a workshop, and there were 78 people in it, and I said, how many people have been unconditionally loved by their parents? And 3 hands went up out of 78. And I knew all 3 people, and I knew it wasn't true for them. course, I kept my big mouth shut. Ernest Holmes says, and he pretty much summarizes this situation we deal with when he says, we experience good and evil because we perceive a presence of duality rather than the unity. At some point in our lives, we move to the point where we realize that we are all one, that we are all here to serve each other, that everyone is special, everyone is divine, and that we need to have reverence for all life. We're going through a dramatic transition on this planet at the current time. And at the current time, we see a lot of hate, and a lot of judgment, and a lot of anger, and a lot of foreign violence, and other terrible things coming to the surface. But there is something else coming to the surface. Let me ask you a question. How many of you have been able to feel a greater spiritual love than you have in your previous life and feel that there is one increasing right now? Yes, 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 yes. This is what's going on. Yes, we face chaos out there, but it is definitely the chaos is the prelude before the peace and before the changes. You know, the thing that has to change the earth is love. And when you judge, you have stepped out of love. I told an experience of one time of where I judged a root, and then afterwards realized I had judged the root, an ugly root of a tree. You hear that judgment in there? And then I wondered why. I thought, well, and I apologized to it. And I said, I'm sorry, I didn't know who you were. And it said to me, nor I you. And I thought, no, I would never say those words. And I realized in my heart, right like an arrow through it, that when you judge another, you create separation. And so when we judge ourselves, how can we feel the love of God? We have to move we have to move beyond the judgment of the self in order to feel that presence. Ernest Holmes in his book talks about Jesus and the prodigal son. Prodigal son is a beautiful story. The son asks for his inheritance, then goes abroad, does all these terrible things, what people we call sinful, horrible things, and then he ends up broke, and he comes back to his father to say, I am not worthy to even be your servant. And what does the father do? Bring the robe, bring the ring, prepare a feast. And the father could not hear the condemnation of the son because God is incapable of judgment. So you might say, well, I always hear about judgment and that God judges. Well, it's been taught for thousands of years that God judges. But if you look at the situation, who is believing that God judges? The spirit within us is perfect. The human is unfolding and evolving. So the human makes mistakes, and the human, in one of its mistakes, ends up judging itself. Then, because it thinks a part of God is human, it judges God as a judger. Well, God doesn't judge. How many people here have ever experienced the oneness with God? That's beautiful. That's beautiful. Was there any judgment in it? No, of course not. Of course not. Now, if that great example and the infinite intelligence, love, and power of the universe loves you just the way you are, what's the matter with you that you can't do the same thing? It's tough because we've been programmed to judge. And I remember after I had the experience of the oneness, And I realized that this essence, being Father, Mother, God, loved me like I was the most beautiful thing in the universe. He loved me like I was the only one. And here I was, 42 years old, screwed up man. Didn't even know what love was yet. And yet, this presence comes to me, and I feel this presence, and I feel its love. And I knew that I was unconditionally loved, and that that power was incapable of judgment. Did you hear that? I knew I was unconditionally loved, and that power was incapable of judgment. Calling God a judger is another human error. It's another human error. And I knew that I was loved beyond my wildest dreams, and I was loved like I was the only one in the universe. And yet I know everyone is loved that way. Everyone is loved totally and unconditionally by the loving source. And it's always present. It's always present. And if you go into your heart and you think about the divine, it's right there. It's right there. It's always there. It's always there. You know, illusion, separation is an illusion. There really is no separation. It's our perception of the duality that causes us not to see the unity. But it's time to change. And we are part of the change that's taking place, and part of our consciousness is raising the planetary consciousness. To me, it's amazing that a number of years ago, when Dr. David Hawkins, the 2005 Science of Mind Hero of the Year, when he was still living, the planetary consciousness was at 205, which is barely over negative. And today, it's over 450. 450. It's more than doubled. Are we in an evolutionary stage or not? We are absolutely in an evolutionary stage. We are in an accelerated spiritual time, and we must focus on the positive, because all the energies are magnifying. And as they amplify and magnify, we have to be careful of the thoughts we think and the things that we do. And as we shift over to the more positive and the more loving, we create a greater peace in the world. Everyone here should be praying for peace in the world every day, decreeing it, declaring it, accepting it, and knowing it every day. Peace. And in my prayer, my daily prayer is that we are all, that's it. We are all aware of the oneness. We are all aware of the oneness on this planet. My God. Can you imagine what it would be like, all of us aware of the oneness? We would have unconditional love for ourselves. We would have it for everyone else. We would have it for all life. What would this planet look like? That's what the planet's going to look like. Imagine it. Imagine that song, Imagine. Oh, yes. Imagine that perfect world. So what's coming? I took some other quotes from Science Mind by Ernest Holmes that I wanted to share. Ernest Holmes says, "Love everybody. Love is the grandest healing and drawing power on earth." He says, "The one who has learned to love all people will find plenty of people who return that love." When we don't judge others and we love others, we find ourselves accepted and loved to a greater degree. Ernest Holmes says, "Love is at the center of our being. We don't have to look anywhere for it. It's an inside job. All is love. Love is the divine givingness, because that's the nature of the divine. God is love, and love is God, one and the same. The love of God is omnipresent. It's always present in every one of us, in every second. We just have to tune into it. The closest that we come to this high love, we've called it agape or unconditional love. But the ultimate love cannot be described. The ultimate love cannot be described. It can only be felt. It can only be felt. And you know that. And when we feel that ultimate love, then we are in that oneness. And life is all about oneness and the unity. Now here's something I set aside. Love yourself unconditionally in spite of your flaws. And then you can do the same to others. Oh, and here's, a lot of times we think that certain things we would do wouldn't be loving. But for instance, leaving a relationship in which you are repeatedly mistreated or taken care of, or taken advantage of, can be a loving choice for both. It's interesting, isn't it? This was in one of the things I was reading. Don't expect to shield someone you love from all discomfort and pain. Challenges frequently foster our growth. And don't lie to protect the one you love. Isn't that interesting? You don't love in return for actions that make you happy. You derive happiness from the act of loving unconditionally. I had see if I got my little sheet of paper here. You got an extra piece of paper? Small one? Oh. It disappeared. Look at that. Anyway, the essence of the saying was that before you came into this life, you created this whole life. You can believe it or not. So you created this whole life, and then you go through this life complaining. What's wrong with that picture? What's wrong with that picture? And if you look back on your life, and I'd like to see your hands on this one, and I got to put the mic down for this. How many of you have found that your greatest damnations, or what you saw as disasters at the time, were your greatest blessings? Yeah. See, and that's the position. Surrender yourself to the divine, live in the oneness, and live in the love. So I want to close with a very special prayer. If you would, just close your eyes and go into your heart. Beautiful, loving source, wondrous God of my being. Your holy presence fills my heart and my being, and fills the heart and being of everyone here. My prayer is for the awakening of this realization for each one of us on an ongoing basis, and for everyone on this planet to experience the unconditionally loving essence of God on an ongoing basis, and to live our lives in that oneness and transform the planet in the process. So be it, and so it is. Namaste.